2, 1, let's go.
Let's do it. It's Saturday morning and we are live together.
Good morning.
Show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have our coffee. We have our mics on, which we didn't one time last weekend.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
But we're here, ready to go. So this is going to be a really interesting show because this is something we've been talking about forever. We get a lot of questions about this, and there's a million different topics talking about creators' rates. How do creators come up with their rates? So if you're listening and you're interested or you're really excited because you don't know where you should start with your rates, listen in. We're going to help you out.
Yes. But first, we're on the search to find the perfect coffee creamer.
Well, we found a good combo.
Trying not to drop dead of a heart attack.
You can't have that.
No.
But what are we trying now? We're doing nut pods, which is a mix of like coconut and almond milk creamer.
Yeah.
And then we do like a splash of, well, I've been doing grass-fed half and half.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. I'm shocked.
I'm back on the real stuff, people.
I'm shocked.
Well, here's the trick. I think you have to mix different creamers because what happens is if you just do one like almond milk, it like breaks down in a weird way in your coffee. It's like not the same.
So we wanted to report on that before we got into today's episode. Now that we have our coffee locked and loaded with our creamer in it, let's talk about, before we dive into like setting rates, how brands and agencies are now planning campaigns, how it all works on the back end before we even talk about like, here's my rate and here's what I'm worth. Like understanding where the brands and agencies are coming from, that's like step one to really get a sense of the campaign planning process. So why don't you walk us through kind of like what that looks like from a brand and agency standpoint? And when we say agency, we mean the agencies that rep the brands,
right? Versus
just a talent management agency. So brands and agencies are the ones that control the budget. And control the campaign program planning. So what does that even mean?
Well, I think it's important. This is good that you brought this up because we were thinking, doing this show, understanding like where the money's even coming from for creators to understand that, I think helps when it comes to your rates and like what we're going to be talking about today on the show. Because once you understand like what's kind of happening behind the scenes when it comes to your rates and like where the money's coming from and how it's allocated, it kind of helps set the tone for being flexible, which is number one. And like understanding like the market changes over time and is always shifting. So I think the number one rule that we'll say just to start is like there is no perfect magic number when it comes to your rate. I think there's this like idea that someone has to find this perfect formula and like this is exactly what you're worth, which isn't necessarily true. But yeah, basically budgets get allocated to certain campaigns and launches throughout the year and big events or certain times of the year that are really important for certain types of brands. So, and when we say allocate budget, they have the leadership at a brand is like, hey, we're going to spend this much money on advertising. And then within advertising, then they split it up into the different things that they're going to be spending money on, whether it's commercials or
events,
YouTube paid ads or influencer marketing. So then within influencer marketing, then they have campaigns throughout the year.
Right.
So they have all these things that are happening throughout the year that then they have to allocate that budget. So it kind of gets whittled down into these like buckets of like during these campaigns that they're planning. And then a lot of times agencies are working on behalf of brands to help them plan their marketing campaigns and their influencer marketing campaigns. So then they reach out to creators and they're trying to work with, let's say they have $100,000 for this specific campaign that they're running. Then it's up to them to decide, okay, how do we kind of
divvy it up?
Yeah. And a lot of times the brands also have a say in like which creators they want to work with. Sometimes we've talked to agencies where like, hey, sometimes brands, they're like adamant on working with this one creator. They love working with them and we have to work with them. So, well, that just ate up half the budget. So a lot of times it just comes down to how much money they even have to work with. And then from there, they're deciding who can we even reach out to. And yeah, sometimes they might reach out to creators hoping that maybe the creator has some flexibility, even though they might be on the more expensive side. They're a bigger creator, a higher engagement. And I think that's where having like a little bit of a flexibility as a creator and just understanding like, should I take this? Does this make sense long-term for me? Or is this like so out of the ballpark?
Which we'll talk through
as well.
So
I think that's kind of just understanding like the I think sometimes people see brands and they're like, well, they have millions of dollars. Why can't they just pay me whatever I want to throw at them? And it doesn't work like that, because these brands and agencies now, influencer marketing is such a big industry and there's so much money going into influencer marketing. It's become more professional, legitimate way to advertise. And so brands and agencies are more dialed in on how they're spending their money.
Yeah, I think that was very well said. And the breakdown helps because we're level setting in that, because it used to be the case of if you had an idea as a creator or as a management team, you could just kind of pitch it anyone's way. And a lot of times it stuck. And they were like, sure, we'll throw money at that, because it was not as professional at that time, and it was still early days in the creator economy. And I think still some of that mentality is stuck around for creators of like, but I used to be able to just like pitch any brand and just get any amount of money that I wanted for it. And now the game has changed because it's become a lot more nuanced, and it also has grown a lot more, even in terms of competition with other creators that are up and coming, other platforms, and the industry shifting, economics shifting. So we're saying all of this because what has been taught in the past and what we're talking about today will always continue to shift and evolve. But this is where things are in Q4 of 2025 today. And also kind of like our methodology behind things that has technically not really shifted since the beginning. Our method has kind of always been the same, of this art and science to pricing and the flexibility behind that, the market rates behind a creator, which we'll dive into all of this. But we've always been intentional around like, we need to make it a win-win for our brand agency partner and also for us and our creators at the end of the day, not just throwing numbers out there to just see what sticks. And also level setting in actually all top tier brands and agencies are not trying to F creators over, because they also don't want the bad press and they don't want that reputation going around. So oftentimes when you see a brand saying like, sorry, it's out of budget, they like oftentimes just don't want to even offend the creator because they even know their budget is so off base for that creator. So they may not come back with one that just does not align. Or also they're just like, I'm not trying to F you over. I don't want to even have that press out there. So typically what we find, especially now with the types of partners we're working with, is there is not this whole idea of like, oh, they just went ahead and accepted that rate. We should have asked for more. That's oftentimes like the knee-jerk reaction of less experienced creators. And the reality is that, or less experienced management teams, but the reality is that no, if we're in that like ballpark, which we have a good pulse on as a boutique team, oftentimes we're not far off. Like we already know what that brand or agency is going to value that creator at. Okay, so with all of that said, can you give us some starter kind of tips for someone who hasn't really done a ton of brand partnerships or maybe any yet?
Yeah. I mean, there's a million calculators online. And I think those are fine, but you also have to understand that sometimes it's just about experimentation. Like creators need to get a feel for what the market's willing to pay them. And so a lot of times when brands are reaching out, obviously they're not going to come with you with an offer right away, which is fine. No one's going to show their cards right away. And this is a little bit different what we're talking about than just negotiating. I think people kind of associate the two, where it's like you kind of just ask for the biggest amount, and there's like this back and forth on like the art of negotiation, and like whoever wins, they get the biggest amount of money. That's not really what this is. This is what we're talking about, is valuing yourself and understanding that. So, but what you can do is when brands reach out is get a feel for, hey, do you guys have a budget in mind for someone like me? Like, what are you working with? Do you have a budget range in mind that you're working with? And
push them. Push them. I like that tip, because I think it's fine to fish a bit to see if you can get a bit more insight and insider scoop on what they're looking for. Do they have a range in mind? Those are some great starting points. And if obviously 99% of the time they don't show those cards first, then going in with some sort of formula to get yourself started. But again, at our level and our creators, just to level set, just to kind of rewind a bit, we're not basing this for our creators on a calculator. We have some ballparks in mind, and we'll talk about that later. But this is strictly for those beginner creators out there.
Yeah. Yeah, so an easy way to get started, and again, this can fluctuate, and it really depends on you as a creator, your engagement rate, your value within the market, meaning there's all these different things that brands want out of certain creators to when they want to work with certain creators and for certain campaigns. But as a starting point, let's just start with Instagram stories. So take your average Instagram story views. You can look at the last 2
Let's
weeks.
say 10,000.
Let's just say it's 10,000, and you want to do something like 10 cents per view. So that's kind of an easy starting point as a creator, or any creator really, but especially for Instagram stories, 10 cents per view is kind of a good ballpark range. Like I said, sometimes brands will not pay you that. They're going to want to come in lower. Sometimes brands are willing to pay you more. And this is not including exclusivity or usage or anything like that. It's just you posting organically an Instagram story, 10 cents per view.
So how would you get to the 10 cents per view, or how would you calculate views?
Well, for Instagram stories, it's easy. You take your average views, 10,000 in this case, times 0.1, so 10 cents.
Okay.
And that gets you $1,000.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that's kind of a good ballpark range to start with. Now you may find that you're worth more than that based on what brands are willing to pay you. Maybe they come with you at a higher offer sometimes. Maybe a brand comes to you and they're like, hey, we have an offer for an Instagram story set. And this is when we're saying story set, that's really the way we look at it. I think as a smaller creator, sometimes people get caught up in creating like a media kit when they have their rates. They have like a rate card and they charge per frame. We're kind of moving away from that. We don't see that as often now.
We've never done that.
We've never done that.
So I think it's also really in poor form for creators to do that, because it shows that it's almost nickel and diming the brand or agency. As an industry standard, you should give them 3 frames for a story set.
If not,
period.
Yeah, 3 to 5 is kind of that like
minimum
story set range.
Yes. And we have creators in our group who far over deliver on that, because it's also less even about, sure, we may have committed to 3 for the brand, but then they want to continue the conversation for their audience as well, to also build that trust. Or they're also delivering story frames that are even organic, that are separate from the partnership. And those are things to keep in mind with what you're committing to, but also over delivering is a key factor in also being able to upcharge on, even though they're only agreeing to what you're giving them.
Yeah.
Showing good partnership, you will land longer term better partners and stronger campaign deals in the future just by over delivering.
Yeah. So to clarify, the price would be for a story set.
Yes.
Basically, because the understanding is when someone's watching, you're not charging per frame, even if you're like, well, I'm doing a story set with 3 frames, but most of it's basically the same people watching those story frames in a row.
Right.
Now, obviously, if the brand's asking you to post on separate days or separate times, they want you to like break out the story frames. Well, then those basically you should be charging kind of separate story sets, because it could be a different group of people who are seeing that. But in general, let's say it's a story set, multiply your average views per frame times 0.1, and that's what you charge for the entire story set. So that's formula number 1. The other thing, when it comes to Instagram Reels, and this is where the nuance really can change, and there's a huge variability when it comes to what we've seen, especially this is why it's so tough to really use a calculator, but we're doing this for people who are just starting out or just want to get like a general ballpark of where to start. And then from there, you're always kind of tweaking and adjusting and seeing again where the market's valuing you at. And a lot of this is also, like you said, the art and science of negotiating, but also the art and science of valuing yourself, and that's where the experience comes in for us as talent management. It is harder for someone who does this on their own because they only see it from one view. We see it from lots of different angles. And so we know what things are most important right now to brands and where the market's shifting and adjusting.
Right.
So for Instagram Reels, a lot of times brands and agencies, they might back into like a CPM, cost per mil is what that stands for, which is cost per 1,000 whatever. Usually it's cost per 1,000 views. So that's a lot of times what they're doing is they're backing into something like that or some kind of metric, even though they might not tell you that. That's kind of where they're coming at that. And even if they come to you with an offer, sometimes they've backed into a CPM that they want to pay for someone like you based on your average views of reels for the last 30 days. So basically, if you take your average views for Instagram reels, let's say it's 100,000, you can then back that into a CPM and use the CPM to kind of get a cost for what you should be charging for your average reels.
So I'll calculate this right live with you guys.
So let's say you have an average, and we'll say you looked at the last 30 days of your Instagram reels. And of course, the thing is with Instagram reels, they fluctuate. Their reach can fluctuate so much. So you could have one day you're getting 50,000 views, some days you're getting 300,000. But so let's say on average you get 100,000.
Yep. And then what?
And then you want to divide that by 1,000. And then this is where the nuance comes into play. So this is where we're going to use a CPM cost. So something like cost per like $25 or $100. And this is where it really can adjust, but let's just say $50 in this case. So you take your 100,000 divided by 1,000 multiplied by $50,
which is the CPM.
Yeah.
That's $5,000.
Yeah. So in this case, you could charge $5,000 if you as a creator feel like you're worth $50 CPM. Now, no creator is going to be like, I know what CPM I'm worth, but this is just like a ballpark of some agencies and brands kind of look at it this way. And the reason why we're not using something like engagement rate is because in our calculation is because engagement rate, Instagram doesn't give you engagement rate. They give you your engagement interactions, but those can be so different than how you calculate engagement rate. There's so many formulas out there and free platforms that will give you your Instagram engagement rate. But if you look at them across different platforms, they all have different numbers. So engagement can vary depending on what's included as part of that formula to calculate engagement rate. So we don't really like using something like that. But the CPM, if you kind of use that approach, you can adjust your CPM based on if you know that you're a stronger performer in your sort of group, that your size as a creator. Do you get really strong comments? Do you have a high US percent following, 80% plus, something like that? If you get lots of higher likes than other people your size, or if you get lots of sends and shares and saves and likes, all of those things matter. So if you know that you're stronger on that end, or maybe you are part of an underrepresented group or a minority group, or the type of person that you are, maybe there are less of you in that category of you as a creator, you can charge a little bit higher on that CPM premium scale. So like, let's say for example, you average 100,000 views for your reels and you want to charge $100 CPM because you know that you're like, hey, I'm rare. It's hard for someone, you're not going to find someone like me. Charge $100 CPM at 100,000 views. So then that's double, that's $10,000 versus someone else who maybe has average or lower engagement. Even if their views average 100,000 views per reel, but their engagement is not that strong, or maybe they have a less percent US following, they're not going to be able to charge the same amount.
A premium CPM.
Yes, even though the views are basically the same. And I think that's the difference. And again, we don't really back into it like that here at IKONICFOX when we're calculating rates and coming up with rates. But like, that's kind of a back of the napkin calculation
for someone who's starting out. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing is we keep a pulse to make sure it's like, of course we could be like, it's going to be $100,000 for a reel and they're getting 10,000 views. I'm like, that at the end of the day, it's sometimes like that doesn't make sense. A brand's not going to pay that if they're smart. And we want the industry to also succeed and come back again and again and again.
Yeah.
So it's important to like understand these kind of baseline numbers and have reasoning when you're getting started on that. But then at the same time, there are all of these other factors, like you just said. Is it you're a diverse creator? You're a diverse creator even within that segment of the foodie space or the home space or whatever kind of space that you fall within. You have a really interesting personality or really interesting look to yourself or home or whatever the case is. You're very talented or you're giving a lot of expertise. So there are so many different factors and levers that then start to click up or down the CPM of just even what you just said, how rare you are in the space. Almost just like if you think of like a really rare Birkin bag from Hermes, like, is it that, or are we, one of many at like a big box retailer? Like, no offense, but there are some people that are more of that Birkin bag. And if you think of it like that, or a rare car or anything like that, like the more rare you are, your personality, your style of content, your POV, what you're teaching people, the value that you're giving, those things start to increase. Like, why would I spend $100,000 on this Birkin bag over this, $50 bag at Aloe?
Yeah.
Well, it's ultra rare. So it's also those factors that play into it. And then on top of this, then we also have usage rights, exclusivity. What does that look like? And I think for beginner creators, this is obviously something that is often overlooked because you just don't have that much experience yet. And these are things that to look out for. So usage rights are how brands can use your content for their marketing purposes in email, on social, on their website, in paid ads. What does that look like? Could they run it in billboards in Times Square? Sometimes those are factors that it's like, hey, that's a huge benefit to you, especially if you're getting coverage in return, especially starting out. So you're not going to necessarily want to charge this crazy premium that then they're like, never mind, we just won't use that for anything. So it's like this kind of push and pull to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And this is also where eventually getting a great team behind you can also see, like, is this worth it? Are they getting the coverage that they need? Or is it something that the brand should be paying a premium on? And with usage rights, how we look at it is, again, what is that brand gaining from using that creator's content? And what can that be potentially removing that creator from for running that content and paid ads for X amount of time? So for example, if we have a foodie creator who is really big on sharing, I don't know, pasta, and a pasta brand comes up and they want to work with that creator and then run that content in ads for the next 2 to 3 months. Well, during that time, it can be very difficult for a competitive pasta brand who then wants to come and partner with that creator to then also work with them during that time, because oftentimes brands then also have exclusivity, meaning you can't not only work with another competitor, but you also can't be seen in ads with the other competitor. So those are factors that we're thinking of when we're pricing things out of like, okay, now take a home creator who's never sharing pasta recipes, but a pasta brand comes to them and they're like, hey, we also want to run in paid ads. Well, then the premium is probably going to look a bit or a lot different for that home creator, because we're not ultra concerned about another pasta brand coming up and being like, hey, we want to run a campaign with this person.
Yeah.
So it's also like, how likely is it? And this is always the art and science to it of like predicting the future, which we can't, but what we can do is use our best judgment of what makes sense for that creator and how unique they are to that market. And the reason for that is it's going to remove you, or could remove you, from partnerships and money that you could be making during that time.
Yeah.
And that you very likely would have been making during that time. And again, it's using your best judgment, or if you have a team, them using their best judgment of how likely is that to happen. And then what is it worth to team up with that brand to then potentially lose out on one, if not multiple brand opportunities that could come up, or nothing comes up. So that's also the flip side. So as much as we'd love to be like, hey, they are going to lose out on X amount of money, so you're going to have to pay for that original brand, that may not actually be the case.
For somebody listening that's like, well, I need a starting point for my exclusivity rates. What do I charge? What would you say for someone?
I would say, again, looking at the factors of, are you working in that category often? If you are, then in general, I think between 40 to 60%, 40 to 60% of your typical rate for, let's just say, a reel and a story per month is what I would then charge for exclusivity. So let's just use an easy number of $10,000. So if you typically charge $10,000 for a reel and a story set on average, then I would use about $4,000 to $6,000 of that per month of exclusivity that they want to add on. So let's just say it's 2 months of exclusivity in the pasta category.
Yeah.
Then I would add on about $4,000 to $6,000 per month, that's now going to remove you from other pasta opportunities if that's a big focus of yours. Now, again, in the home creator space or the tech space, and it's a pasta brand and you never work with pasta brands, and I would charge between probably 20 and 30% to just make it make sense just in case something did come up and not be taken advantage of. But at the same time, you're not at high risk of losing out on a bunch of other opportunities and revenue because you're taking that on.
Yeah.
I was also going to say that also taking into consideration where the economy is too.
Oh, for sure.
Because the creators who are holding strong on just like what they could charge maybe late last year, like, well, the industry always shifts, even the markets shift. So just because the market was willing to pay you that last year doesn't mean that they're always willing to pay you that every single time.
100%.
And even aside from the economy and the economics of it all, it's also just like in general, even certain campaigns are worth less or worth more. So sometimes creators are like, but I've been used to getting paid X amount by this brand, like pretty consistently over different seasons. Well, maybe this year economics are tighter, or they're putting less money and less focus into these types of categories as well. So their budgets are always going to be shifting, and that doesn't mean that they don't value a creator as much as they did. They still value those creators because they're obviously coming back.
Yeah.
But the reality is the budgets are always shifting around because brands at the end of the day want to stay alive always, and they want fresh faces. They want to do cool stuff. They want to be relevant. They want to stand out. They want to drive sales. They want to survive. So they're going to also protect themselves of like what makes sense to keep our business moving in the right way, right direction.
And it's a give and take. You know, there's times when that brand, if they're a great partner and you've worked with them for a long time and they've paid your full rates, that's awesome. But then there are going to be times when they come back to you and they're like, hey, we have some leftover budget at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, or we had this campaign and like we weren't going to really do it, but we decided to bring in like an influencer. We'd love to work with you. You're one of our top creators. We love working with you. Could you do it for this? I know it's not your full rate, but like we'd love to make this work. That's where, again, having flexibility matters. And I think that's where we see building long-term relationships matters too, because again, if you're like, no, you got to pay my full rates. Remember, I have my rate card. That turns them off. And they're just like, okay, like we're kind of losing interest in this creator now. Like, where's the partnership here? Again, it's a give and take. And we're not saying that you're not worth a certain amount of money, but in some cases, it's cool that they came back to you and want to work with you. So we see that a lot of times too, and having that flexibility does matter.
Yeah, it has to make sense both ways.
I'd also say too, as a newer creator, or if you're doing this on your own and you don't have a team and you're like, okay, I'm trying to find my way, and I think also being real with yourself when it comes to your engagement and your numbers on the back end is super important, because we do see creators who get kind of caught up sometimes in what their friends or other peers or other creators are getting paid. And I think they think that they should get paid that same amount,
right?
Even though on paper, you might look similar, but on the back end, like what do your numbers actually look like? And not to say you have to ask them, what are your numbers, but just be realistic about like where you are in the market and understanding like if a brand is, like you said, most good high quality agencies and brands, they're not trying to screw creators over all the time.
Right.
So even if they paid your friend a certain amount, but they're only willing to pay you half, then there's probably a reason why they value that other creator a different way.
For that campaign.
For that specific campaign, yeah. And so I think it's just having that understanding too of, again, not comparing yourself so much to what other people are getting paid. Now, we understand like you don't want to be taken advantage of, but I don't think that's happening. We're not seeing that at all really from our end. When you're working with good, high quality creators and agencies, sure, they're trying to get a deal just like you are. But at the same time, they're not trying to screw people over in a way that's like malicious.
Now, there are still the agencies that we do work with and that we are wary of because they oftentimes don't operate with that same level of partnership. Not saying that they're bad, not saying they're bad agencies, but they're just not going to have that same level of like, we're making it a win-win for all.
Exactly.
It's a bit more cutthroat.
Yeah, and I think also they tend to be more on the performance-based marketing side of things, where they might not say it right up front, but a lot of times you're like, how did they give me such a low ball offer? Like, do you know, did you see my numbers at all? Like, do you see my average views on my reels or my engagement rate?
Or my level of content. And I think that's one thing that we haven't talked about too, is level of content is also something we're talking to, especially performance agencies around. We're like, have you seen the level of content this creator is producing? And also, have you seen how their audience engages with them? Aside from views, how are they commenting to the creator? How are they doing? What does their US audience look like? Are they over-indexing in a certain geo that brand or agency is really trying to target?
Yeah.
What is their core alignment to that brand or agency? Or, sorry, to that brand?
Yeah.
I think all of those little nuanced factors are things that we always are pushing our brands and agencies to think about, especially the more performance-driven agencies. That's what you're talking about now, is they can come back and be like, this is what we have to pay. And we're like, that's a really low ball rate, not only just for views, but for the creator as a whole, and how well aligned they are to that brand, the messaging, and also their level of community that they're bringing. So those are all things to think about. And if you're a creator who shoots really high quality content and has really interesting POV and has all of these nuanced factors, you're a diverse creator in that segment that you're in, be sure that you are charging for that, and even charging for your time to create those assets. If it takes you freaking 10 minutes to shoot the reel versus it takes you, I don't know, a few days to storyboard, and also make sure that you're creating this in a way that's almost a bit more commercial quality, then charge for that. Charge for your time that it's going to take to create that. But also, if you are charging a premium and you half-ass that content, then don't expect the brands to keep coming back being like, wow, I was wowed working with them. It was really worth the cost.
Yeah. Or if you create content that you're trying to go viral each time, and maybe you do get high numbers, but like maybe they're just, you don't have high engagement. Like you get lots of views, but you don't get many likes, sends, comments. There's a difference with that versus creating content that performs really well from an engagement perspective. So brands will see that too.
So hopefully this gives you guys some idea of structuring, not just structuring some baseline rates, but also some of the nuanced thought process behind it. And again, this was largely about Instagram, and we can break down some of these other platforms if you guys are interested. But this is really to serve as a resource for how we think about things. But again, there's so much nuance that goes into the creator economy and each individual creator. That's why we are boutique, hands-on, work with the top teams out there. So if you guys have questions, be sure to shoot us a DM, and we're happy to cover other topics like this in the future. But hopefully you guys enjoyed, and we will see you in the next episode.